So the Pac-12 had a good weekend. Not that they, I'm talking on the football field, by the way, sort of indirectly, in totality, on the whole. You understand where I'm going here. The Pac-12 saw a lot of Pac-12 teams win NCAA tournament games. You had Colorado win a first four game. You had Colorado beat Florida. You had Oregon beat Creighton. Washington State took care of Drake, who was a popular upset pick. It was a really good time. The Pac-12 began 6-0 in the tournament. Arizona is in the Sweet 16. They've got a matchup with Clemson looming. If Arizona wins that game, they will contribute more money to the Pac-12 slush fund here. So the conference, I think, is, with a variety of factors, whether it's the 2-year contract for the new commissioner, Teresa Gould, or the expiration in 2 years of the Mountain West media rights contract with Fox Sports and CBS, or the 2-year scheduling arrangement with the Mountain West and football, or the 2-year affiliation with the West Coast Conference for your non-revenue sports. Pac-12 is lining up to make some sort of move in a 2-year time span, and they need to accumulate a war chest as big as possible. They got $255 million from the departing 10 Pac-12 schools as a settlement, and then the NCAA tournament is rolled around. Now, this money gets paid out over the course of several years, but still, that war chest picked up $20 million and counting, depending on how Arizona does, for the Pac-12, meaning that they have just further solidified their footing. And I think that is a great place to be. If you're Oregon State and Washington State's presidents, you're sitting back with your feet up. Maybe you're at a beach somewhere right now just hanging out and going, men's basketball team got to the round of 32 at Washington State. Women's basketball teams in the Sweet 16 at Oregon State. Boy, we sure are proving that we can compete with all the big brands and all the big teams out there and compete at a national level, which of course, we all know to be true. So this is good financial news. Good financial news for the Pac-12 to add $20 million in there. It's a non-zero number. I mean, you're increasing by about 10% what that war chest previously was. And there are payments and there are disputes and there are all sorts of uses for that money. But primarily, it is going to go towards keeping their athletic departments funded at a Power 5 level, which has been their stated goal. And this money will certainly allow them to, continue along that sort of path and one day rebuild the conference. You got to pay exit fees. You might have to give a school some money because the media rights deal isn't enough. There are all sorts of ways that you can use that cash. And I think that's great for the Pac-12, but the question is what happens now, right? This has been a great sequence. If Arizona makes a run, it'll be a couple more $1 million. That's all good and fine. You can have coaching salaries at a competitive level. You can have money in reserve if you need it here, if you need it there, or whatever, right? But I think there's a next step for the Pac-12. There's a next step. And of course, this is the Pac-2. Teresa Gould, the commissioner, refers to it as the Pac-12 because, that's what it will be again one day. Maybe not 12, but maybe 10. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I certainly will be around for that. And I hope you will be too. But the next step for them is to further establish their credibility in the eyes of the entire country, all the athletic departments and the conferences, but I think also in the eyes of recruits, of players. So if you're going to be able to attract coaches and assistant coaches of a certain caliber because you have this money in your athletic department, that's great. But if the pitch to those athletes is not strong enough, you're going to eventually see a diminished roster compared to what you were once able to obtain. Now, for these two particular schools, neither one is accustomed to being a recruiting power. But in the transfer portal era, this is, I think, a very, very real thing. And so having the credibility to rebuild your league as you see fit is one thing. But having the credibility with everybody else is another. And that's why I think this upcoming season for Oregon State and Washington State is so darn important. Because I might be breaking news here. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And so Oregon State, I know, crazy, right? Oregon State and Washington State are going about this Mountain West scheduling partnership and making the best of a bad situation. But if they go out and make the best of that on the field, well, suddenly that might turn a head or two or three or four. I don't know how many heads it'll turn. But I know if you make as much noise as possible, that's going to help you sustain success. And that, I think, is step one towards getting what their long-term goal ultimately is, which is an invite to a Power 4 conference. Now, we may just be, destined to head towards a Power 2 and, the Big 12 and the ACC could be gone in 10 to 15 years. They might not. They might be able to stick around. But still, if you're Oregon State and Washington State, your long-term goal is to get into the Big 12. You know how you do that? You build the premier Group of 5 conference in all of college football, and you win as many games as you possibly can. You make yourself so attractive to other conferences that they can't say no, that they have to look at them and say, oh man, if we're adding teams, those teams have to be at the top of the list, irrespective of the size of their school or what kind of academic standing they have or what their television market is. We just got to have that football program. Man, it's been humming. It's been great. So if they're stabilizing themselves, as I mentioned, financially, but now that's got to translate on the field. That's got to translate on the field. Our friends at FanDuel have not posted a win total for Oregon State and Washington State. I wish they would. I'd be very curious. I imagine for both schools, it would be fairly high. Now, last year, Oregon State certainly had a better roster than the one they will put on the field this year. Washington State's, I think, is more comparable. I don't think Washington State has had as big of a drawback of talent compared to Oregon State, but I think that for the Beavs and Cougs, both coaching staffs, you have Trent Bray, who was a defense coordinator with the Beavs for the last couple of years and did a fantastic job. Both coaches understand how to get the most out of the guys that they are able to get in there. But if you want to show everyone else that you are worthy, it's got to be done on the football field. Basketball is great, and getting the money is great. But at the end of the day, a round of 32 appearance from Washington State men's basketball, a phenomenal achievement that may very well, unfortunately, lead to Kyle Smith, their coach, being pulled away by a bigger school. Stanford is reportedly going to be interested in him. And you talk about a school that is particularly happy to be getting an influx of money. That'd be Washington State. They don't want to lose their basketball coach there. But what they do want to do is showcase to everybody else, we are the best realignment targets out west. And I think if I were Oregon State, I would just, get a paper copy of that lawsuit that Florida State brought against the ACC and just kind of manually snip out the part where the Seminoles allege that the ACC missed the point of realignment by adding Cal and Stanford and SMU instead of a school like Oregon State, who's had more success over the last several years. You want to have those little feathers in your cap. You want to have people think of your school, your football program specifically, and think about what they're capable of, about not how they're struggling, not how they're fighting, not how bad you feel. At some level, you maybe want to have people. No, actually, I take that back. You don't want to have that at all. Look, there was a time for sympathy. I think it's kind of come and gone. You have to move forward. You have to be aggressive. You have to be proactive, forward thinking, and you've got to be able to create an impression to everybody in the sports landscape of this is utterly ridiculous, right? Because initially it was, this is ridiculous and I feel bad for him, which I do. But now you want to make a perception of your football programs that goes like this. We think this is ridiculous, whoever we may be. University presidents, conference commissioners, media folks, it all contributes. It all feeds into one big pot, and all this sort of stuff gets filtered around and such. You want people to think your programs and think that is ridiculous that they're left behind. They're too good. They're too good to not be up at this level. So that, I think, is the next step for the Pac-12 as they continue to solidify themselves financially. Florida State, speaking of the Seminoles, they have a new quarterback. You remember who it is? We need to talk about him.